going to dive in to chapter 7. Let's do it properly, introduce it properly. Part 2. The Sea Cook. Treasure Island. Chapter 7. I go to Bristol. Nice and topical at the moment. It was longer than the Squire imagined ere we were ready for the sea, and none of our first plans, not even Dr. Livesey's, of keeping me beside him, could be carried out as we intended. The doctor had to go to London for a physician to take charge of his practice. Oh yeah, because the Squire has made him just stop being a doctor while he makes him go on a ship with him to dig up some coins, possibly. Well worth it. Well worth it. The Squire was hard at work at Bristol, so the Squire's like gone on ahead. He's like, "You sod yourselves out! Diving down to Bristol, get on the ship and everything, you carry on!" Typical Squire, headlong, charging, straight away. Very dominant, loud-mouthed male figure. And I lived on at the Hall. That's a nice change for little Jim. He's not running the bar anymore at the Admiral Benbow. He's knocking about National Trust property, living the time of his life, under the charge of old Redruth, the gamekeeper. Almost a prisoner, he specifies, but full of sea dreams. That's nice. So I burped a bit then. Sorry. Taking the romance out of the adventure somewhat. I'll go again. But full of sea dreams, and the most charming anticipations of strange islands and adventures. I brooded by the hour together over the map. I brooded together. Who with? Jim's left his mum in the pub looking after Billy's corpse, says Bulble Rob. Yeah, Billy's corpse still hasn't been moved in all of this time. Billy Bones is still just lying there, belly up, from when he flies. Well, they haven't got time. They've got to open the pub back up. Everybody's coming in. Evening, Ange. How's the Jesus? Oh, I know. Just move around it. Waiting for the bin men to take him away. Jim in his support bubble, says Minnie Slot. Yeah, exactly. Jim and Redruth, the support bubble. Old Redruth, the gamekeeper. Anyway, I brooded by the hour together, over the map, all the details of which I well remembered. Sitting by the fire in the housekeeper's room, I approached that island in my fancy from every possible direction. I explored every acre, every 4 acres of its surface. I climbed 1,000 times to that tall hill they called the Spyglass, and from the top enjoyed the most wonderful and changing prospects. Sometimes the isle was full of dangerous animals that hunted us, but in all my fancies nothing occurred to me so strange and tragic as our actual adventures. Don't spoiler it, Jim, don't spoiler it. So the weeks passed on. Thus, he means, the weeks passed on. Till one fine day, there came a letter addressed to Dr. Livesey, with this addition. To be open... Well, this would be in Dr. Livesey's voice, but echoing slightly because it's in his head. To be opened in the case of his absence. By Tom Redruth, or young Hawkins. Obeying this order, we found, or rather I found, for the gamekeeper was a poor hand at reading anything but print. There wasn't the education back in them days. He wouldn't have gone to school, the gamekeeper. He would have been probably gardening since he was about 3. The following important news. Old Anchor Inn, Bristol, March the 1st, 1769. Now I'm just going to skip ahead to see who is actually writing this because it's addressed to. It's got to be. No, it's Squire Trelawney. Oh, good.
Dear Livesey, as I do not know whether you were at the hall or still in London, I send this in double to both places.
Must have taken him ages. No copy and pasting these days. It's all by hand. Well, he's probably made somebody else do, hasn't he? Probably simultaneously. Knowing the upper classes in the 18th century, no regard for human life.
The ship is bought and fitted. She lies at anchor, ready for sea. You never imagined a sweeter schooner. A child might sail her.
Probably Jim will probably bastard end up sailing, knowing poor old Jim.
200 tons. Name Hispaniola. I got her through my old friend, Blandley.
It's exactly the same now. There's one fat old posh bloke who knows another fat old posh bloke, and he's hooked him up with a whole ship. Nothing has changed.
I got her through me old friend, Blandley. We were in the Bullingdon together. Blandley, who has proved himself throughout the most surprising trump.
Now this is obviously a fond term that the Admiral keeps using, a trump. He's an absolute trump. We've established that that's a positive thing, obviously to us. The connotations are somewhat more negative.
He's an absolute trump. The admirable fellow literally slaved in my interest.
I doubt that.
And so, I may say, did everyone in Bristol, as soon as they got wind of the port we sailed for. Treasure, I mean.
So Dr. Livesey has said to him, do not mention this to anybody, because literally everybody's looking for this map, especially the worst pirates in the country, who we know for a fact are all hanging out down in Bristol. He's an idiot. There's no man I fear more than you, Trelawney, if you can't keep your mouth shut. That's what the doctor said, and it's been proved right. Redruth, said I, interrupting the letter, Dr. Livesey will not like that. The Squire has been talking after all. I know, Jim. I've just said the same thing.
Well, who's better at right?
Growled the gamekeeper.
A pretty rum go if Squire ain't to talk for Dr. Livesey, I should think.
Very loyal is Redruth. He reminds me of Mr Carson from Downton. He's Stockholm syndrome. He won't take the word of an honourable doctor. This is Lady Sybil all over again, my friends. He's got to have Carson's... Carson says Auntie's Bloomers, yeah. Auntie's Bloomers. Good evening, Auntie's Bloomers. Yeah, well, let's give him the voice of Carson then, old Redruth.
Well, Mrs Fatmore, who's a better right?
Growled the gamekeeper.
A pretty rum go if Squire ain't to
Mr Carson never say ain't
to talk for Dr. Livesey, I should think, Lady Mary.
At that, I gave up all attempt at commentary. Probably a few people wishing I'd get all attempt at commentary when I'm reading this book, and read straight on.
Blandley himself found the Hispaniola, and by the most admirable management, got her for the merest trifle. There is a class of men in Bristol monstrously prejudiced against Blandley. They go the length of declaring that this honest creature would do anything for money.
Oh, that doesn't sound like the upper class.
That the Hispaniola belonged to him, and that it sold it to me absurdly high. The most transparent calumnies.
Lying gossip, he calls it.
None of them dare, however, to deny the merits of the ship.
Well, that's the main thing, Trelawney. As long as you're happy. So far, I went back into my own voice then. So far, he's cheered up the Admiral.
So the Admiral, the Squire.
I've confused myself now.
So far, there was not a hitch. The work people, to be sure, riggers and whatnot, were most annoyingly slow.
So it's basically poor bastards having to... Riggers are people who are putting the rigging up on the ship. So great big bits of rope that they're hanging from from the crow's nests and things, back-breaking, awful work. And Squire sat there going,
"Come on, hurry up!"
These people.
Were most annoyingly slow, but time cured that. It was the crew that troubled me. I wished a round score of men, in case of natives, buccaneers, or the odious French.
Good, full of prejudice, absolutely full of prejudice, of course he is.
And I had the worry of the deuce itself to find so much as half a dozen, till the most remarkable stroke of fortune brought me the very men that I required.
Oh, that's lucky.
I was standing on the dock when by...
There's no way people can be staying to listen to this voice. This is a really long letter as well. If people leave, fine.
But I will continue. I was standing on the dock when by the merest accident I fell in talk with him. I found he was an old sailor, kept a public house, knew all the seafaring men in Bristol, had lost his health ashore. Ashore?
So then, like, he's been put to sea. He was at sea, and now he's come back ashore, and he's not doing too well with his health. This guy's a massive knob, says Green T24680. I'm inclined to agree.
And wanted a good berth as cook to get to sea again.
Oh, a sea cook.
He had hobbled down there that morning, he said, to get a smell of the salt.
Convenient.
I was monstrously touched. So would you have been, and out of pure pity I engaged him on the spot to be ship's cook. Long John Silver, he is called, and has lost a leg.
Flashback. Jim, here's a fortnibbit. Take this fortnibbit and tell me, Jim, if ever you see the one-legged man.
And has lost a leg. But that I regarded as a recommendation, since he lost it in his country's service under the immortal Hawk.
The Admiral Hawk, he means. A great terror of the seas. A British admiral.
He has no pension, Livesey. Imagine the abominable age we live in.
Nothing's changed, Squire. Nothing's changed. They're not looking after people who leave the forces. They aren't. It's genuinely true. I'm not even joking. They don't. Nothing's changed.
Well, Sam, I thought I had only found a cook. But it was a crew I had discovered. Between Silver and myself, we got together in a few days a company of the toughest old salts imaginable. Not pretty to look at, but fellows by their faces of the most indomitable spirit. I declare we could fight a frigate.
None of this sounds very good to me.
Long John even got rid of 2 out of the 6 or 7 I had already engaged.
Squire, man, this is sounding bad.
He showed me in a moment that they were just the sort of freshwater swabs we had to fear in an adventure of importance. I am in the most magnificent health and spirits, eating like a bull, sleeping like a tree, yet I shall not enjoy a moment till I hear my old tarpaulins tramping around the capstan. Seaward ho! Hang the treasure! It's the glory of the sea that has turned my head. So now, Livesey, come post. Do not lose an hour if you respect me. Let young Hawkins go at once to see his mother, with Redruth for a guard, and then both come full speed to Bristol. John Trelawney. P.S.
There's a P.S.
P.S. I did not tell you that Blandley, who, by the way, is to send a consort after us if we don't turn up by the end of August.
That's a good plan. So basically he's like,
Look, if I'm not back in a few months, please send help.
so he's not all, sponge brain, old Squire. however he sounds.
Who, by the way, is to send a consort after us if we don't turn up by the end of August, had found an admirable fellow for a sailing master. A stiff man, which I regret. A stiff man? Which I regret. But in all other respects, a treasure. Long John Silver unearthed a very competent man for a mate, a man named Arrow. I have a boatswain, or bosun, who pipes lives here.
So he's saying basically, so a bosun who pipes, that's a guy who's keeping discipline on deck, a bosun who pipes. So this is someone who's probably been in the employ of the British Navy. So he's like, with one of them little whistle, so everybody's like, getting everybody on deck. So lovely and disciplined.
I have a bosun who pipes. I have a bosun who pipes lives here.
So I think that was worth the interruption, wasn't it?
So things shall go man-o'-war fashion on board the good ship Hispaniola. I forgot to tell you that Silver is a man of substance. I know of my own knowledge that he has a banker's account, which has never been overdrawn. He leaves his wife to manage the inn. P.P.S. Hawkins may stay one night with his mother,
JT. You can fancy the excitement into which that letter put me. I was half beside myself with glee, and if I ever despised a man, it was old Tom Redruth, who could do nothing but grumble and lament. Typical Tom Redruth.
You ought to do exactly as the Squire says, young Mr. Hawkins, Lady Mary.
Any of the under gamekeepers would gladly have changed places with him, but such was not the Squire's pleasure, and the Squire's pleasure was like law among them all. Well, it probably was, because I imagine if they ever did anything wrong, he probably smacked them. Because that is the sort of people who were in charge of England at this time, and still are. The next morning, nobody but old Redruth would have dared so much as even to grumble. The next morning he and I set out on foot for the Admiral Benbow, and there I found my mother in good health and spirits. The captain, who had so long been a cause of so much discomfort, was gone, where the wicked cease from troubling. So, as in he's dead. Not said whether they've removed his body yet, but I think we can probably safely assume that they have. The Squire had had everything repaired, and the public rooms and the sign repainted, and had added some furniture. Above all, a beautiful armchair for Mother in the bar. He had found her a boy as an apprentice also, so that she should not want help while I was gone. So she's found another child to run the pub for her. It was on seeing that boy that I understood, for the first time, my situation. I had thought up to that moment of the adventures before me. Not at all. Okay, I'm going to rephrase that. I had thought up to that moment of the adventures before me. Not at all of the home that I was leaving. And now, at sight of this clumsy stranger, he's probably, 5 probably, greenhorn, who was to stay here in my place beside my mother, I had my first attack of tears. I'm afraid I led that boy a dog's life, for as he was new to the work, I had 100 opportunities of setting him right and putting him down, and I was not slow to profit by him. So now Jim's passing the buck onto this poor. He's passing his frustrations onto this poor bastard who's taking his place. See what I mean? Look. You teach people punitively to work. They pass it on to it. Creates a bad working culture. And I hate it. Compassion gets results. Especially when you're putting 6-year-olds in charge of a pub. The night passed, and the next day after dinner, Redruth and I were afoot again and on the road. I said goodbye to Mother and the cove where I had lived since I was born, and the dear old Admiral Benbow, since he was repainted, said the sign they mean, the pub sign, no longer quite so dear. One of my last thoughts was of the captain, who had so often strode along the beach with his cocked hat, his sabre-cut cheek, and his old brass telescope. Next moment we had turned the corner, and my home was out of sight. The mail picked us up at about dusk, so the early coach that brings the post to everybody. The mail picked us up about dusk at the Royal George on the Heath. Well, the Royal George is a pub in Willenhall, in my hometown. So I like to think. No, I mean it's nowhere near. I mean we know they live near Bristol. They live on a cliff, as far as we've established, on a cliff on a beach. So they're nowhere near the Black Country, I'll tell you that much. Which is the furthest point from the sea. So either that captain was going on a very long walk, or they're not in Willenhall, which is of course a shame. I was wedged in between Redruth and a stout old gentleman, and in spite of the swift motion and the cold night air, I must have dozed a great deal from the very first, and then slept like a log, up hill and down dale, through stage after stage. For when I was awakened, at last, it was by a punch in the ribs, and I opened my eyes to find that we were standing still before a large building in a city street, and that the day had already broken a long time. "Where are we?" I asked.
"Bristol," said Tom. "Get down."
Mr. Trelawney had taken up his residence at an inn far down the docks to superintend the work upon the schooner. Thither we now had to walk, and our way, to my great delight, lay along the quays and beside the great multitude of ships of all sizes and rigs and nations. In one, sailors were singing at their work. In another, there were men aloft, high over my head, hanging to threads that seemed no thicker than a spider's. It must have been quite a sight to have walked down Bristol dock in the 18th century. I mean, the ships that would have been coming in there from all the way across the British Empire, which was just kind of growing. Also, for saying 1769, we're still 7 years off the American Revolutionary War. So this is Britain at the height of its power, cruelty, and splendour. The flags that would be flying, the Spanish Empire, the Dutch colonies in the West Indies. A terrible, extraordinary time, and all in Bristol dock. Maximum pomp, says Paul Rob. Absolutely, maximum pomp, and maximum evil in many ways. Plenty of ways. I've lost my place now. But really, I mean, you can imagine diving clear of things being rolled into the harbour. Yeah, Minislot 1997 says, yes, indeed. This would, of course, have been, I guess, 1769, just under 100 years since Edward Colston was slaving in Bristol Harbour. Not yet a statue up to him, but now mercifully one at the bottom of the ocean. There would have been slave ships. There would have been in Bristol dock. That would have been part of the day-to-day in scenes like this. It would extraordinary, horrible thing to be normalised, but it's worth. You've got to be aware that it was very normal in Great Britain. We I think sometimes we put these scenes in America or something, or like they weren't happening here. They were happening here. They weren't happening in ancient Rome. They weren't happening in America. They were happening here, right? At the same time, they were happening here. And they'll be happening at the same time that this story takes place. It's very true. Anyway. In one, sailors were singing at their work. In another, Men were aloft high over my head, hanging to threads that seemed no thicker than a spider's. This would have been the grand industry of this country. Exports and imports and colonising and slavery. And all these men from all over the country, not just from port towns, not just from Liverpool and London and Bristol and places like that. Also, the whole country, from Ireland, from the colonisation of Ireland, for people press-ganged into the ships, press-ganged into the army and the navy, or to work in the merchant navy, or in the East India Company, of course we know about, and in private ventures like this, because mad bastards like Squire Trelawney could just put the word about they were after something. They could talk to their old mate Blanders, get a ship, and then, and here's probably where Squire Trelawney slightly differs, talk to a man, just a guy who shows up, and then let him hire your crew. Though I had lived by the shore all my life, I seemed never to have been near the sea till then. The smell of tar and salt was something new. I saw the most wonderful figureheads that had all been far over the ocean. I saw besides many old sailors with rings in their ears and whiskers curled in ringlets and tarry pigtails and their swaggering clumsy sea walk, and if I had seen as many kings or archbishops, I could not have been more delighted. And I was going to sea myself, to sea in a schooner with a piping boatswain and pigtailed singing seamen, to sea, bound for an unknown island and to seek for buried treasures. While I was still in this delightful dream, we came suddenly in front of a large inn and met Squire Trelawney, all dressed out like a sea officer in stout blue cloth, coming out of the door with a smile on his face and a capital imitation of a sailor's walk.
"Here you are!"
he cried. He always cries.
He cried. "And the doctor came last night from London. Bravo! The ship's company complete."
"Oh, sir," cried I, "when do we sail?"
"Sail?"
says he.
"Sail? Oh, we're not sailing."
I'm joking again. That's a callback to yesterday's episode, yesterday's chapter. That Squire, he's always going,
"Sail?"
says he.
"Sail? We sail tomorrow." End.